He is one of the most legendary pirates in history. Tales of his cunning and riches have spread across the centuries since his trial and execution in 1701. But some believe his trial was unjust, and he was a fall guy for a chain of command that leads all the way up to the King of England.
There's no doubt that there is a conspiracy behind all this.
Through historical investigation and scientific evidence, the truth is laid bare as we open the mystery files on Captain Kidd. William Kidd has gone down in history as a ruthless buccaneer.
I want men with iron in their blood and steel in their sinews. Hatred that corrodes the soul.
But in 1695, he is in fact a reputable and experienced sea captain based in New York, at this time part of the English Empire. Richard Zacks has studied Kidd's life in detail.
I mean, Captain Kidd was one of the leading citizens in New York City. A strong, clever, intelligent man and a successful captain.
Within 6 years, Kidd falls spectacularly from grace and is finally tried and executed as a pirate. The story of his downfall starts in 1695, when he goes to London to set up a privateering venture. Andrew Lambert, maritime historian.
Privateering is business. It's a business opportunity. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the major powers at sea, when they went to war, they needed reinforcements. There were no reserves to call on, so they would commission regular merchant vessels to take prizes from the enemy. So this was licensed private enterprise warfare.
Privateers are licensed by the state to capture and attack enemy ships. They are permitted to keep a large percentage of the spoils from these encounters as recompense for the risk they take. It is a perfect opportunity for an experienced sea captain like William Kidd, when the financial rewards could be high. His target destination is the Indian Ocean. The ocean is the crossing point of major trade routes between India and the West, so has the potential for rich prizes. Over the next couple of years, Kidd seizes several ships until, in 1698, he finally heads for home. But his actions have not gone unnoticed. Tom Wareham has been researching the historical documents surrounding Kidd's life.
He is completely unaware that opinion has turned against him.
While away, Kidd has been accused of piracy.
Privateering is entirely legitimate and would have done him no harm at all. Piracy was entirely illegitimate.
And on his return to America, he is arrested and sent to trial in London, the capital of the English Empire.
The question of Captain Kidd's trial has led to an enormous amount of debate. Was he given a fair trial? Was he guilty of the charge of piracy?
The issue is whether he kept within the terms of his privateer's license. In the British National Archives, Tom Wareham is going to examine this license, which is also known as a letter of marque.
What we have here is one of the letters of marque and reprisal, which were issued usually by the Admiralty to privateers or to private merchantmen to enable them to go and attack the king's enemies or to seize merchant vessels upon the high seas during time of war. You can quite clearly make out William Kidd's name in various places.
The letter shows he is licensed to attack and capture French ships. But if Kidd took a ship that was not French, then he is guilty of piracy. In his trial, the principal ship in question is the Quedagh Merchant.
The Quedagh Merchant is the most important ship that he takes. It's the largest, it's the most valuable, so it's very clearly that's the one that they're going to focus on.
Unfortunately for Kidd, the Quedagh Merchant is owned by Armenian traders. It is therefore an illegal capture. However, Kidd claims that at the time he thought the ship was French, and he has the paperwork to prove it.
Kidd believes he's within his rights to take them because he managed to acquire French trading passes, and he therefore argues that this makes them in some ways French, and he's lawfully entitled to take them as a privateer.
The crux of the matter rests on the manner in which Kidd captured the ship. It is a game of subterfuge. Kidd approaches the Quedagh Merchant flying the French flag or colours. The Armenian-owned Quedagh, thinking Kidd's ship is French and fearing attack, responds by doing the same. Once alongside, to maintain their cover, the Quedagh Merchant sends a French crewman to Kidd's ship with a French passport.
Merchant ships traveled with half a dozen passports, and they would present the correct get-out-of-jail-free passport if they could.
Kidd can therefore legitimately claim that he thought seizing the Quedagh Merchant was within the terms of his license.
He's done what all warships of this period do. He's used another flag to gain a tactical advantage. And as long as the ship he took was genuinely French, that would have been fine.
But of course, it isn't. Kidd has also played the same trick before, when taking another of his prizes, the Ruparel. Critical to the success of this ruse is getting the right paperwork.
What's fascinating about Kidd is that at his trial, the key piece of evidence, whether or not he was guilty of piracy, hinged on a couple of French passes.
These documents are the essential evidence for his defense.
Kidd, of course, was expecting his papers to be delivered to him, and some of them were. But what were missing were the vital French passes.
Kidd refuses to start the trial without this key evidence.
He is so adamant that he says, I will become an accomplice to my own death if I plead without those passes. He knew how important they were, and yet the clerk basically told him, if you do not enter a plea, guilty or not guilty, that will stand as a guilty plea, and you will be instantly convicted. So Kidd eventually pled not guilty.
Kidd's only defense against the charge of piracy is on the brink of disaster. His life in New York, his family, and his respectability are slipping away. The prosecution goes further and brings on witnesses who deny ever having seen any passes.
You know, it's just so dismissive and so disheartening.
But the judge goes on to make another vital statement. One that has formed the key evidence in the case for Kidd's wrongful conviction.
The judge clearly states that if the passes indeed exist, then Kidd would be acquitted of piracy.
The existence of the passes was a matter of debate until 1910. Incredibly, several centuries after the trial was concluded, these French passes were discovered hidden deep in the Board of Trade's archives. They had been simply or mysteriously misfiled.
These are the French passes which Captain Kidd thought were going to save his life and were going to be the centerpiece of his defense. They certainly existed, and here they are. This is the French pass of the Ruparel, which is the equivalent to the passport. And this is, more excitingly in a sense, although slightly less better condition, is the pass for the Quedagh Merchant. was really known as the Kara Marchant, and here it is.
By the judge's own admission, the existence of the passes made the capture of the two ships lawful, and Kidd should have been exonerated of these two piracy charges.
What's so astounding about this is that those passes were entered into the record of the Journal of the House of Commons almost 2 years before the trial. And you can open the journal to this day, turn to page December 4th, 1699, and there are the French passes.
The authorities should have known of their existence.
There's no doubt that there is a conspiracy behind all this.
Unfortunately for Captain Kidd, the Quedagh Merchant's owner has powerful connections.
The real problem for Captain Kidd is the East India Company and the relationship between the East India Company and the English government.
Though Armenian-owned, the Quedagh Merchant was brokered by the English East India Company, one of the largest and most powerful corporations in England at this time. The interests of the government are fundamentally tied up with the company. The company, meanwhile, is being strongly petitioned by the Armenian merchants and their fellow Indian traders. Piracy has been a constant problem in the Indian Ocean, and the taking of the Quedagh Merchant is the final straw.
The East India Company are out of favour all over the place, and they desperately have to try and recover the situation.
The East India Company must see Kidd convicted.
Kidd's trial is definitely a show trial, there's no doubt about that.
And it turns out they are not the only ones needing blood. Back in 1695, Kidd could not afford to fund the privateering venture on his own. So he sought the help of the Earl of Bellamont.
Bellamont gets very excited and agrees to fund the whole expedition to find about £6,000 to actually provide Kidd with a powerful warship and a crew and all the provisions that he needs. The problem is, of course, that they've got to raise money. And Bellamont is an impoverished Irish peer, has very little money at all. But he has contacts.
Bellamont found some powerful investors.
He contacts some people with money, and in this particular case, it happens to be some of the most powerful Whig politicians in Britain.
These nobles are Secretary of State, the Earl of Shrewsbury, the Earl of Romney, Lord Somers, Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Lord Orford, First Lord of the Admiralty. All of whom stood to gain a share of any profits from Kidd's venture. And critically, one more person would also take a cut of the spoils. King William III of England.
Well, I think Kidd made one absolutely fatal miscalculation, and that was that the Lord backers would save themselves by exonerating him, by proving he was not a pirate, therefore they were not backers of pirates. They took a different tact. This man betrayed us and became a pirate, and he just didn't calculate that they might go that way, and that was very big.
This investment deal was originally made in secret, but with Kidd's arrest, word got out.
The scandal surrounding Captain Kidd was enormous. Imagine if the king actually commissioned sailors to go out and steal in his name secretly, and he would get 10% of their goods. I mean, it was an enormous scandal.
The investors have powerful political rivals, the Tories, who are not going to miss the opportunity of undermining these nobles. To avoid any association with piracy, the Whig lords have to prove that Kidd has gone rogue.
So everyone wanted him to be a pirate. The English East India Company wanted Kidd dead. The four noblemen wanted Kidd labeled as a renegade pirate, and the opposition party wanted Kidd labeled as the king's pirate.
In the face of such opposition and loss of critical defense documents, potentially deliberately concealed, the claim of an unfair trial has long been debated. Kidd could simply be a reputable businessman who becomes embroiled in an international political crisis and is sacrificed as a scapegoat to save the skins of more powerful men. However, there is another charge leveled against Kidd during his trial. which could not be justified by missing paperwork.
He is absolutely flabbergasted to be charged with murder. He did not expect it at all. He thought this was about piracy and privateering. And he's charged with the murder of the gunner, William Moore.
In many ways, the key to the whole Kidd case is the murder charge.
In 1697, 2 years into his voyage, Kidd argued with crewman William Moore. Moore spoke out of turn, and Kidd struck him on the head with a bucket. The following day, Moore died.
Question is whether that was murder, whether it was premeditated, whether it was manslaughter, whether it was accidental.
Kidd argues the blow was justifiable.
Kidd claimed there was a mutiny afoot and he needed to assert himself. The crew had been hired on what they called Articles of Agreement, and the nickname for them were no prey, no pay. If they don't capture anything, they don't make a nickel.
At the time of Moore's death, they had only taken a few goods from a single ship.
The killing of one of his crew is out of character, which just shows the pressure he's under to make this voyage work commercially. Privateering is a results-based activity. If you don't succeed, you lose money. Desperation takes over. And the thing that's pressing Kidd, one strongly suspects, is that he's been very successful in his career so far, and he's risking failure, and he's risking losing all of those high-profile supporters who've put him in this position.
Kidd's argument suggests he was trying to quell an uprising and inadvertently killed Moore. And there is a chance Moore died because of an underlying illness. Rose Drew has studied sailors' diseases and injuries by looking at the bones from the 16th century wreck of the Mary Rose.
Here are some individuals who had head wounds that actually removed sections of bone, and they healed. Bone cannot grow when you're dead, so obviously these people survived these injuries. We've got a pretty deep puncture wound right here, sharp object of some sort. And this individual has bone that's been removed over here.
Like these men, Moore could have recovered from a significant blow to the head. So Drew is interested in why, in this case, he didn't. In the trial, the ship's surgeon gives a clue about Moore's skull, saying, "I felt something give way."
I think that's hard to explain how it would be a general softening, unless there was a huge depressed fracture with a lot of small pieces of bone. But I find that hard to believe from just a light bucket. We have some buckets here at the Mary Rose, and they just weigh a few pounds. So it makes one wonder if the man didn't have some sort of underlying chronic illness. Are there common diseases you'll see in sailors that might predispose someone to dying from an injury that might not be fatal? And one of the first ones that came to mind, of course, was scurvy.
Scurvy is a common sailor's disease at this time, caused by a lack of vitamin C. On a long voyage where fruit and vegetables are scarce, up to 50% of the crew could die.
The lack of vitamin C, which causes scurvy, causes a breakdown of soft tissue. Here's someone who had scurvy. It gets quite lumpy. That is basically healing scurvy, because all of these blood blisters under the periosteum have now been replaced by bone. So it's healed.
The Mary Rose was a short voyage ship, and the sailors could go ashore and allow their bones to heal. But on a long voyage like Kidd's, such recovery was rare. If Moore had scurvy, it could have affected his resilience to the blow.
Before it's healed, you tend to bleed easier. Your blood vessels could give away much easier. So what would happen is his blood vessels would be more prone to break. People who die suddenly of scurvy might have an aorta that just bursts. So the softness could have been blood under the skin.
Whether Moore had scurvy that hastened his death, it is now impossible to know. However, during Kidd's trial, the facts remain.
He killed the man, and he killed a man who was not threatening his life. It was a capital offence, and he had no legal right to do that.
Kidd may have got away with capturing the ships if the French passes had been present, but there is no such paperwork for this murder charge. This once reputable captain's defence lies in tatters. And he is then convicted of yet another 3 counts of piracy.
The one cast iron thing that we know about Kidd is he did pirate 3 other vessels, which didn't have French or any other passes.
You know, the trial is both fair and unfair. It's unfair because the passes, which of course we now know existed, aren't delivered to him. But it's scrupulously fair in other ways. I don't think there's any doubt at all that Kidd was guilty. He stepped over the line from legitimacy to piracy.
Perhaps his greatest mistake is his underestimation of the seriousness of such a crime.
We have to put ourselves in Kidd's position. The Indian Ocean is a very long way away in 1700. You know, it's not just the other side of the world. It could be on the dark side of the moon. What's happened out there? Who knows? Is anybody in New York overly bothered about a couple of Indian vessels sailing to the Red Sea? No. Captain Kidd, reputable local man, good London connections. Surely that outweighs any complaint by natives. He's misjudged the situation. The voyage is a catastrophe from a commercial point of view. And the pressure of circumstances means that he feels that in order to save the voyage, he has to bend the rules. And he bends them too far. He strays over from dubious privateering into blatant piracy.
"6 years ago, this sea captain was a respected man of the community, with a society wife and 2 young daughters. Now, in London's infamous Old Bailey, he faces condemnation as a pirate and a sentence of death. Still, there are those who believe Kidd is wrongfully convicted.
I find Captain Kidd's verdict, the verdict, appalling. I think he was, at worst, guilty of manslaughter that would rarely have been applied. The 2 captures with French passes, he should have been exonerated. The others were small potato. They weren't a big deal. So the idea of hanging him for that, I just find appalling.
Captain Kidd's actions at sea seem to have made full use of the legal grey area that privateering occupied. And it was an area that many men took full advantage of. Unlike the unfortunate Kidd, most survived without feeling the full force of the English Old Bailey tightening around their necks.
We open more mystery files in another double bill at the same time tomorrow. Stay tuned for brand new We Built the Titanic.